Hey everyone, James Marin here, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your Steadicam to hard mount on a vehicle. Now, in case you don't know what hard mounting is, it's when you take a hard mount like this that allows you to put your Steadicam arm into the hard mount, which then attaches to something like speed rail or a Mitchell mount that is also attached to a vehicle. What hard mounting does is that it allows you to use the speed of the vehicle to work for you, the operator, and make your life easier while also providing the same stabilization from the arm and sled that you're used to as a Steadicam operator. This video will be part 1 of 4 total videos. My cat's crying. In this first part, I'll show you how to set up your hard mount for Steadicam, and in the following 3 parts, I'll show you what are the most common vehicles that you'll probably run into, including the rickshaw, an electric tricycle, and an electric camera car. And I'll also show you examples of how to use each one of those vehicles. I'll leave links in the description below, but be sure to check out every video just so you have a complete idea of how to hard mount on anything. Towards the end of this video, I'll show you some hard mounts, including this one, that are on the market for you to either purchase or rent. And at the end of the video, I'll show you some tips and tricks on how to coordinate and actually shoot using any one of these vehicles. Say something. So first thing you want to do is just sit on the vehicle and just get a feel for it. That'll tell you pretty much most of what you need to know about the adjustments that you need to make. For me, I typically start with the hard mount and the height of it. A good place to start is essentially you want to mimic the height of when you wear the vest and where the socket block is. So this is a little bit higher than that. If I wanted it to be lower, it's really easy for me to just unlock over here on mine. You can loosen it up and then I can go any height. But obviously if it's too low, then if you imagine the arm, it would be sticking out, and then you'd have to be like, you'd have to just consider that it might be in your way. You also want to consider that the angle of the hard mount isn't too far this way, because again, the arm is coming out and you don't want to have it, too far to the right. So typically for me, I tend to have it about this height, so it's clear from my legs, and sort of angled out a little bit forward, just so the arm isn't completely, to the left and just sort of away from me. So that's kind of like a good place to start in terms of putting the hard mount on the speed rail. Now that we have this guy on and we've determined that this isn't too close or too far away, the next thing to do is basically put the arm on. So I'll take that, my friend. Thank you. And this is pretty much like the same thing as your vest. You have control of the front to back balance of the rig by the screws here. And same thing, you just pop in your arm and you turn these guys in. And obviously you don't want it to be angled too close to you, because then the camera comes towards you, and you don't want it to be angled too far away from you. So the thing that I tend to do to try to get a good sense of where it's going to be is I start without the sled and I just do it with the arm. So right now I could tell that this is too angled to the left. So with my mount, I can actually angle this up by this knob. And then that way it falls a little bit less to the left and is going to be more in balance. And the reason I want to do it with the arm is because I don't want to do it with the rig and have a grip, just like take it on and off. It just becomes really cumbersome. So it's easy to just have the arm itself sort of tell you what's happening. And this is about like a good rough point of like how I'm going to want the balance of my front to back and my side to side. So from this point, I could put the rig on, but before I do that, what I also want to do that is worth mentioning is the screws on the socket block of the arm need to be adjusted. When you adjust your side to side on Steadicam, you do it via these 2 screws here. With hard mounting, you want both of them to be in, because otherwise if you have this sticking out the way it is, it creates too much torque here and this could potentially break. So you want to screw both of them in and you get side to side via the mount over here. I like this Flow City mount because you could wear the arm and the rig at the same time and adjust this without having to take it on and off, which other mounts you can't do that with. Take your T-handle tool and bring that screw all the way in. And same for the bottom. And again, you could see like now both screws are all the way in, and this is just it's just less wear and tear on your arm. So you're just trying to limit the risk of anything breaking while on the job. So another thing worth noting is that if you're going downhill or uphill, you obviously need to adjust the front to back a little bit more. So if the rig needs to be away from you in kind of like an exaggerated way because you're going downhill and you don't want the rig to come towards you and smack you in the face or anything, this particular mount, I'm not sure about other ones, but this one has a lot of travel. So you could really bring this forward and have the rig be away from you in case of going downhill. And the same thing applies for the opposite. Like if you're going uphill, you could really bring it towards you a lot. So it has a lot of room to make adjustments, which is important depending on like the angle of the terrain that you're on. Okay, so right now I could already tell that my side to side's fine, but my front to back is off a little bit. So this is unfortunately the caveat with all of the hard mounts, is that sure, you can adjust the side to side with the Flow Cine mount, but I can't do the front to back on any of them just because you have to unscrew one portion of it and tighten up another. And if you do that, your arm is sort of loose and you don't want it to like fall on you. So I'll hand it to Adam here. So it's the same thing on your vest. Like if you need it to be closer to you, then one screw goes in and another comes out. So right now, this is pretty much there. It doesn't really want to get away from me too much or anything, but you can see it does a little bit, but this is fine. You know, your arm is doing also a lot of the work too. So this isn't really like a big deal. This is something that I would fly. My arm itself isn't in the way. I could rest up against the speed rail over here and still look at my monitor and have the rig work in my favor instead of against me. And I still have control of everything that I need to. And so this is a really comfortable position. Art was nice enough to set up some speed rail by my feet, which is really nice because if my feet were dingling, then it's just sort of one other thing to think of instead of focusing on the shot. So having something to brace yourself with, like the speed rail, and having something to put your feet on, I think is really important because that way you're comfortable. And when this thing takes off, if you're going really fast, you not only have a seatbelt, but you also have this to kind of like hang on to as well and use your body to rest up against it. And it's not uncomfortable and it helps you during the shot. So in terms of balance of the actual sled, what you want to do is that you want to have it completely neutral. Obviously, I have it neutral because I'm using a volt, but let's say you don't have a volt. If you don't have a volt, you still want it to be neutral because if it had drop time to it, then this would act like a big pendulum and it would swing on you when this is changing speed, going faster and slower. You don't want it to be fighting you. So if you're completely neutral, this thing could just, be like that. And you can see it's still staying straight, it's not swinging on you or anything like that. And then if you're controlling it with your hand, then you're still stable. If it had some drop time to it, then, and in fact, let me just show you real quick. We'll give it like 1,002. So if we had drop time to it, it would be swinging a lot more. And this is fighting you instead of helping you get the shot. So you don't want the pendular effect of the Steadicam to be fighting against you. So that's why you want to be neutral. And if you don't like flying neutral, you can at least do a very, very slow drop time, and that'll get you the equivalent of what I'm talking about here. If you're a volt user, for me, I'll obviously put the roll up all the way. I'll play with dampening. Oftentimes I have it just all the way off because I don't like to have any dampening on the volt itself. But for vehicle stuff, you can turn it up quite high. Turning up the dampening helps it combat some of the swinging from, the speed that you're going sort of influences the rig. Starting and stopping influences the rig. So if you have it turned up, it helps you more. And if you have it turned down, It's basically just not enabled. In terms of tilt, that's just a personal preference. You may want to have it completely off so you could easily adjust and tilt up and down and make it easy on yourself. But sometimes when I'm doing vehicle stuff and I want the lens to be pointed completely straight and I don't want it to be moving at all on me, I tend to turn it up quite high. That way the lens feels like it's completely locked in and it's never like adjusting on me. Cool. I think that's that. Now, before I get into the suggestions of what you could do to set yourself up for success when it comes to hard mounting, I wanted to go ahead and show you some hard mounts that are actually on the market. This one is from Flowcine. It's called the X mount. It's what I've been using in the video, and it's a little bit on the pricier side in regards to some of the other products that are on the market, but I think it's a really great setup. You can have this X mount, which is already comes with the speed rail portion of it. And you could also get it with the Mitchell adapter, which is, of course, more expensive. But this is a really great mount. I love it. I think it's a fantastic tool. Here is the Mitchell adapter. So you could use it both on speed rail and you could use it with anything that takes Mitchell mounting devices. Up next is the hard mount from Walter Clausen. Unfortunately, I had to just Google it because their website isn't currently working for whatever reason. This is what it looks like in its case. It has everything that you need in a single case. It's a really great product. It's what I've used in the past before I bought my Flowcine. I would rent this from other operators who owned one, and it does all the same things that the Flowcine X mount does. It has a speed rail adapter. It has a Mitchell mount adapter. The only thing is, if I remember correctly, the knob over here that adjusts the side to side, it needed to have a tool because it wasn't something that I could adjust by hand. But again, I could be wrong. It could have been the mount that I rented specifically, and maybe you can do it without any tools, but I just remember that was my experience, and therefore that's why I got the X mount. Unfortunately, I don't know the price on the Walter Clausen mount because the website isn't working, but it's roughly around the same price as the X mount. Maybe it's a little bit cheaper. I think I remember it being a little bit cheaper. And you could probably find this mount used on either the Steadicam forums or on Facebook or something. Lastly, there's this mount. A lot of times a hard mount is called a Garfield mount, but I want to say this is like one of the original designs. You could see that it's pretty basic, but it also is the cheapest out of all three options. So this is something that you could get from Autorama or, maybe some other online retailer. As you can see over here, they have the loops for speed rail. I think this is what this is. And it has the Mitchell mount already attached to it. So it's a really simple design. So, get what works for you. It's all going to do the same thing. I like my mount because it makes it easy to use, but obviously get what you prefer. All right, so now that we've gone over the basics of how to hard mount your Steadicam onto a vehicle, I'm going to go over a few tips for you to set yourself up for success when it comes to doing the actual shots. One of the things that I recommend doing once you have your hard mount set up onto the vehicle is for you and the driver to survey the runway. Driving the actual portion of the road or whatever you may be on to see if there's any things that are going to impede on what you're doing. Let's say, for example, you're shooting on a road. A lot of times roads can have cracks that could create bumps that you could avoid, or maybe the road is uneven. This is really typical, and therefore you'd have to go on your hard mount and adjust the side-to-side balance. Sometimes the steepness of the road can change. It could be level on one side, and at the end it could be steep. And these are just things that you want to just consider and know ahead of time before doing the shot itself and discovering it on the day. Another helpful thing to keep in mind is that because you're going to be behind the camera, a lot of people are going to look to you for leadership in terms of getting the shot done. By this, I mean, you're going to be coordinating a lot of these variables, including the driver and where the driver needs to be, how fast they need to go, what they need to do to help you achieve the shot. You're going to be coordinating a lot with the Burst AD, which will help you bring all the elements that you need to in order to get rehearsals and eventually getting the actual shot. It also means that you're going to be coordinating a lot with the actors in order to achieve the shot. And a lot of times, because you're in the action and the camera and all the elements that are creating the shot is in one place on the set and the director and the cinematographer are in another place on the set, then a lot of times they're communicating through you in terms of what changes need to be made and maybe passing notes to the actors and things like that. So another helpful thing that I like to do is that before we take off and before we rehearse, if we're trying to achieve a particular size, let's say we're trying to achieve a medium and we're leading the actor, I'll ask the actor to stand in front of the camera so myself and the actor can kind of get a feel and memorize the distance between each other. And because we checked our distance before we actually took off, it really helps the actor get a sense of how close they need to be when we're actually at speed. So if they're too far from us, they'll know that they need to speed up in order to get that consistent medium because we already checked it ahead of time. And lastly, once you surveyed your runway and you checked your frame size and distance, they're going to want to do a rehearsal. And a lot of times someone will suggest to do a half-speed rehearsal. But the thing with half-speed rehearsals is that it doesn't show you all the mistakes and all the errors that you'll discover once you actually go into doing a full-speed rehearsal. So I suggest, if it's safe and you've done all the things that I've suggested, you've surveyed your runway, you've checked your frame size, then just do a full-speed rehearsal because you're going to find out all the things that you need to find out in order to make the corrections that you need to make. Another thing worth mentioning is something called soft mounting. Soft mounting is when you wear the rig just like you would normally, but now you're sitting on a vehicle. I don't recommend it for a few reasons, mainly because of your own safety. If you're soft mounted to the back of a vehicle and something were to happen, you're attached to the whole system and that could be really dangerous. Another reason is because it can exhaust you a lot faster than just normal Steadicam. This is because with the speed of the vehicle, you're also having to stabilize yourself to keep yourself upright while the car or whatever you're on is moving. Therefore, you're using much more of your muscle and you're also just exhausting yourself that much faster. Because you're wearing the weight for a long period of time and you're also seated for a long period of time, the vest could eventually dig in and pinch a nerve. Now, I bring this up because it's fairly common for a production to say, hey, we don't really have money to rent any of these vehicles that you've brought up, but we do have a golf cart or a gator already on the set to transport people. Maybe we can use it to get a shot. The thing is, you can, but it's at a risk to you. So it'll be up to you whether you feel like it's safe or not, or it's worth the risk. But of course, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't ever do a soft mount. Here you could see Peter Robertson, ACO, doing a step off of a vehicle in order to achieve this long runner from the movie Atonement. I highly suggest that you check it out on YouTube. He uses a combination of a rickshaw and an electric camera car, and then also, of course, walks the parts that he can, but he uses both in order to conserve energy and achieve the shot. Alright, so that's it for this part of the Steadicam Hardmount series. Be sure to check out the description below to take you to part 2, which is the rickshaw, and part 3 and 4, which is the e-bike and the track car. And of course, be sure to leave a comment below with any questions that you might have regarding this video or any other part of this series. And lastly, if you have any suggestions for future videos that I can make for you guys, be sure to also leave a comment below with that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.